Why do you believe people distrust AI in the hiring process? And Scott, why don't we go with you here first?
Yeah, I mean, if we look at this, it's distrusting AI or anything new. I think things like AI have a lot of things do clickbaity headlines, a lot of concern about roles that will be replaced. And the deeper you dig in, you get to learn a lot more about, AI isn't new. You get to learn more about, where it's evolving and how it evolves. And I think in a recruiting process, because it is so new to most individuals, there can be a distrust of those things that you don't necessarily understand. So when I think about this and have approached this myself, where it's like, I want to more deeply understand not AI as a theme, but like what is it in terms of AI in certain disciplines, AI as it relates to recruiting, AI as it relates to, workforces of the future and where things can be efficiently done and people can be more effectively enabled using AI. I think when you understand the concept in, from a foundational detail, that can help sort of, deconstruct distrust that you would have, particularly as it relates to the hiring process. I do think that there's also, as you read a lot and you understand a lot about AI in terms of the biases that can be built into AI. And if you think about biases in general relative to recruiting, it's always something that, recruiting teams have strived to eliminate. So when you think about, how new practices and processes coupled with things that people are aware of, I can see why it happens. But that's also why you have to, work with trusted partners. You have to think about, how the AI was constructed in the large learning model and the learning models associated. But there's a lot to unpack there. And so I completely understand it when people distrust it. But I do find that through that additional research and that additional learning, about the topics itself, it can actually help alleviate some of that distrust because you're armed with the actual information you need.
Definitely. And you've touched on a lot of topics too that we're going to be bringing up later on in the
Oh,
conversation,
yeah.
which is really, really good, foreshadowing it all. James, anything else you'd love to add to that?
I plus one everything Scott has said, and I'll just be brief and say this. I can't think of another part of the modern enterprise that has transformed as much as the people space has based off of the requirements and the need of the people function, but it's also underinvested in the most, right? I can't think of any other part of business that's happened. So if you factor that together and those two things colliding, I think that you have the traditionalist, if you will. And I understand to Scott's point that they would be a little hesitant on AI because there is a fear of what does the modern people leader look like and how do they understand and deploy tools of now and in the future. So that's the only thing I would add.
Definitely. Mariam, anything on your side you'd want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Jeremy, with James and Scott's point of view, and they have so much experience in the hiring space. One thing that I wanted to add, there have been horror stories, right? So part of the distrust is coming from the truth that there had been cases where there were algorithmic mistakes or AI was used in a not so right way in the past. So part of the mistrust is coming from the reality that people had experienced. Part of it is also, in my opinion, coming from the fact that hiring is a little bit of a puzzle, especially when it comes to candidates. And a lot of times, they might feel they are qualified, but they don't clearly know why they didn't get the position, even though it's all being done by humans. And then you throw in AI into the mix, and it feels like wrong if AI is making a decision for someone's destiny. So it kind of helps with that, kind of the mistrust and it touches on kind of a very emotional kind of aspect of us as humans, that we are being rejected, and it feels like wrong to be rejected by AI. So I think a mix of kind of human emotions with some of the problems that we've had in the past, they're all kind of contributing to this mistrust.
Definitely. And, I think this is probably the only time in my life that I would be confused with James. I think the facial hair is it, but he is way more accomplished and better at what he does than I am. Getting into that second question now, how are you working within your company or companies you work with and candidates to overcome that distrust and correct maybe misconceptions that are out there? And I will go just kind of back on through, or I'll start with James this time. James, what about you?
Well, we have a net promoter system so that we can understand what is the candidate experience, whether they have a role with us or not. We know that we're the front door to the organization. So we have our internal enterprise AI system, and we basically take the sentiment from the net promoter scores globally. We break that down by regions, and I score each region, give that feedback to not only our talent discovery folks, but hiring managers that are part of that process. And then we have a global net promoter score as well. And we break down the sentiment analysis of what those interviews are like. That helps us tweak how we're talking about the company, how we're talking about a role, what is the sequence and the cadence of the process. So, for example, General Motors is a large piece of business that we just won. We need to hire about 90 people in a relatively short amount of time. One of the things that we figured out is that 4 or 5 interviews was too much in order to meet the business need, but also candidates got a little exhausted and confused from that process. So we took it down to a 2-step process and really expedited that. So that's currently how we're using AI specifically within what we call talent discovery, aka recruiting.
Nice, nice. Maryam, how about you?
I think in order to establish trust, the important things are explainability and control. So within the company, I think if you are implementing AI, whether it's for, summarizing interview notes, or whether it's like kind of understanding applications, applicants, resume, whatsoever, if you are able to explain what the algorithms are doing and to be able to trust that, and also to be able to give control to team members, those are the elements that you can establish trust. So that's how they would feel like, okay, they understand what these algorithms are doing and they can influence them in the way it fits the objectives of the company. So I think that those 2 elements are key for establishing trust within the teams. And then for the candidates, I think also transparency is important. Just to be very open that we are using AI as a tool, and this is to the benefit of our company, and it's also to the benefit of the candidates. The fact that we get to communicate more effectively, we are more efficient in our sort of the communication and also getting back to you. So I think transparency is important, and also kind of making sure that we are all on one side, like understanding that, okay, well, we are building things better and we are using these tools, but we are together. So if there is a problem, let us know and we'll fix it. And because it's explainable, we could go back and fix things. So being able to explain, having control, and then being transparent are key to establish trust.
Great. And Scott, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely I agree with exactly what Mariam was talking about in terms of the establishment of trust, like clear and consistent communication, being honest and transparent with how you're approaching, these practices, and allowing people to ask questions and challenge. I think when you lay it out in that complete sense, you're able to, build a deeper sense of trust. However, you need to recognize that people will still have questions and they will still have a bit of skepticism. Again, I think it's also in terms of everything that everyone has mentioned here. Plus, I would say, are there additional resources that you can actually directly guide people to enable their learning so that you help select some of the best programs and practices that they can learn from versus people finding it themselves in a simple Google search?
Yeah. Well, and I just want to ask kind of this yes or no type question for everybody on the panel here too, which is, obviously people don't know what's going on behind the scenes. We see a lot of conversations with people saying, oh, well, it's AI and the ATS that's making a decision on the candidate, when really it's not. Do you think that companies should maybe post a disclaimer on their careers page or post how they are using AI in their hiring process? And Scott, I'll come back through for you.
I believe that they should. I believe that, again, it's in the transparency that is really helpful to be able to establish what you're using, how you're using it, and what it'll be used for. Particularly if we think about the approach that a lot of people have towards their data privacy. A lot of the things that we see sort of generally in the world as it relates to data privacy, I think it is good for an organization to be very clear from even an FAQ standpoint on their careers page. Here's the tools that we use. Here's how they're used. Here's how this impacts you. Again, better to set the context and provide the information than leave gaps that people fill in on their own.
Definitely. Maryam, your thoughts?
Definitely. I encourage everyone that works with us to disclose that on their career page, on the job description. We also, whenever we are interacting and sending an email to candidates, we also disclose that we are using AI, and the transparency is key, as I mentioned.
Definitely. James, your thoughts?
Yeah, what comes up for me is clearly articulating the features and the benefits of how you're using AI. And then data privacy is important to me. What are we doing with the person's phone number, their email address, their physical address if they're providing that? So I think being upfront about that is really important. When we look at spam and all the different challenges that we have with data privacy now, I think people really want to know that. And if we talk about features and benefits, let's say that it's a manufacturing company that requires a specific Six Sigma or lean qualification. Typically, I think people want to work with others that are qualified because that also infers trust. So AI can be used for a lot of things, and one of those could be making sure that the workforce is specifically qualified in safety environments, right? Or specific coding languages like Python, et cetera. So only adding to what the panel said, but I think the data privacy piece is important to say up front as well.